Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture Podcast. I'm sure you're probably the same as me, that if somebody messages you or phones you and says, hey, do you want to come fishing? It's very hard to say no. And I was thrilled when a friend of the podcast, Jethro Binns, sent me a message and said, hey, do you fancy coming up catching some pike or trying to catch some pike at Chew? And I'm really excited to be here today. We're looking out, it's a moody, murky background this morning. I was driving up, I treated myself to a room so I didn't have to get up so early, and driving up the M5 yesterday, the rain was falling, it was absolutely bucketing down. I've looked at my home river, it's come up about 4.5 feet overnight, so we got a big river there, and I've not fished Chew for many years. The only time I last fished it was for pike, and I was talking to Jethro, who's standing next to me at the moment, reminiscing of some of the spots. I recognise them now looking out. But Jethro, it's great to be back at Chew. It's great to be back with you today. How are you doing?
Not bad, thanks, Pete. I'm actually still a little bit sore from yesterday. I managed to come out and have a little recce, so I'm not sure if I'm developing RSI from just a bit too much casting, repetitive movements. But apart from a slightly sore wrist, doing all right. I'm really looking forward to getting out today. Conditions, as we were saying, I mean, on the face of it, look perfect. It's overcast, it's murky, not too much wind. I think it's due to pick up a little bit later, but we're looking good. So yeah, just excited to be out and looking forward to it. I'm glad you said we're trying to catch some pike rather than catching pike, because that takes the pressure off a little bit. But
that's the former guide in me. I know you never say we're going to catch a fish. That's a very dangerous road to go down. So yeah, very happy to put that one in. But what's the plan for today, and what are you thinking?
Well, we'll sort the tickets and then get out towards Stratford Bay. I think that's the far side. So we're going to be looking for like 9 to 12 foot of water. It's lovely at the moment. You've got a couple of foot of weed on the bottom, so the pike are kind of lying up. I like that. It gives you, if you know there's weed on the bottom, there's cover for the fish. I've got a fairly good idea where the fish are. There's been some good fish come out recently. I think we'll probably start with intermediates and DI3s. Slow retrieve, small flies, and just work the areas where I know they're fish. We don't know when they're going to switch on. I was here 10 days ago, covered the same water for most of the day, but it was actually really a 2-hour spell where they're highly active, lots of fish coming up the water, follows, and then landed some big fish. So I've got no doubt that we'll be covering fish. It's just whether they're gonna switch on.
And that's some great advice. And I was saying to Jethro when we were setting up that, my temptation, because it's a big fly, is to move it relatively quickly. But that's some, knowing people who've got their finger on the pulse is a wonderful position for me to be in. And is that sort of the method that's been working for you? Or do you tend to sort of fish slowly and then speed it up or mix stuff up? Is that how you sort of go about things?
If I'm out with somebody else, ideally, if I'm coming to a new bit of water, I would always suggest fishing complete opposites to start, and one person trying to fish one way with a big fly and then deep, or with a floating line and a small fly, and trying to figure it out. But you do have to figure these fish out. I've had days on here, or days on other waters for that matter, where a certain technique has worked and they do want something very, very specific, and that might be a DI7 roly-poly as quick as you possibly can with a small fly, or that might be a floating line with a 12.5 foot, 13 foot leader, thinking, fishing like sink and draw technique. So it's strange, like the last couple of days that we've been on here, it's all been about a really slow retrieve, figure of 8 retrieve out the side of the boat. It's been quite a lot of wind, so the big thing for me is contact. Right? That's the most important thing. Like, if you've got too much wind here and you're trying to fish out in front of you, you're not going to be in contact with the fly. So trying to use the angles of the boat, fishing around the side, and then it's been just a really, really slow figure of 8 retrieve, trying to get that fly down to 6-7 foot, a couple of foot above the weed, and hopefully the pike are just lying there. But that's early in the season. Then I don't feel like they're like on it. You've had days here where I had 18 fish and, they've just been coming up in the water and you're happy to fish. They're my favourite days, actually, when you're able to fish 1 or 2 foot below the surface of the water. Much bigger cone, fish are looking up, and if they're prepared to come further, and chase, then you're going to catch more fish. But when they're not quite switched on, it's about just getting down a little bit deeper and actually going a little bit smaller, I think. But we'll see. We'll find out today.
That's some really good advice, and about contact, I think. And let's put this in perspective a little bit, because I'm sure people are listening know of Chew Valley. They know of it as a trout fishery, but also probably of a pike. And you said, some of the fishing's been pretty good. Putting that into context, what sort of, you were telling me a little bit earlier that there's a few less jacks around. So what are we looking for? Is there a stamp size of fish or a year class or anything that you're thinking that probably is the size that, if you were describing an average size pike for Chew, what would it be?
It varies. I've fished here for 10, 12 years now and seen all the cycles. They definitely go in cycles. And we had a jack explosion kind of 3 years ago. And we were going out, we were catching 40 or 50 fish a day. But the majority of them were 2 to 3, 4 pounds. They've all gone. Well, I say all gone. I had one micro pike yesterday, actually. But generally, it's changed significantly this year. There's a lot of 18 to 22 pound fish around, which is great. Really nice to see. I mean, I've seen a couple of really big fish come out. Actually, we saw one 130 yesterday, but there's a good stamp of those kind of high teens in there, which bodes well for the future. And they fight the best as well. They're so much fun. They're so powerful. You get that kind of speed, but then also that strength. So there's a good number of that kind of size fish in here at the moment, so which bodes well for the future, but also is great for us. So yeah, less jacks. Typically, there's a big fish just moved there. Typically you would have expected to go out and pick up lots of jacks, and then the very occasional 1 in 4 trips you might go and get a big double. But now that seems to have shifted, and there's more doubles, but you've got to kind of work harder for them. So I think that's probably the reality of today. We're going. I often think that the big fish do kind of spend more time together. So if you can find that football pitch size of the lake where those big girls are congregated, then that's where we're going to try and spend most of our time. And I've got a fair idea where they are, so we just got to go and cover them.
Let's keep our fingers crossed for that. I think I've got a new name for one of your new flies anyway, a jack explosion. That's a great name for a fly, hey?
Well, it is, in theory, yeah. Can we have a big girl explosion now instead?
We'll give it a good go. Now, it sounds like they're opening up the shop now, so I think we're probably going to go ahead, get our permits, and then we'll keep you in touch with how the fishing's going to go. So I don't know if you fish Chew or if you're aware of it, but it's about 1,200 acres, and we've made a 5, 6, 7 minute journey out. These are the nice things. Jethro's great company. We've been talking about rooster fish. We've been talking about permit and self-guiding yourself on trips and how much fun that can be and how interesting it is. And those videos that came out at the time about rooster fish running down the man that I know we've talked about on the podcast previously, and how they set the scene. And it was funny that, as somebody who doesn't do a great deal of pike fishing, and I was explaining that trout are sort of my bread and butter, but it feels like I've gone out for a steak dinner today, and I'm excited. As I always say on these things, I'm old enough to know better, but I still love it. I'm still as enthusiastic and still as excited about casting a fly. It's something I don't know a great deal about. Jethro showed me a picture of a friend of his who caught a 39-pound pike just recently, and my mind starts to think, how am I going to hold one of those things if I get lucky enough? So I'm starting to think of those things at the moment. Then we were talking about conditions as well, and there's very, very low cloud. I think rain's coming in a little bit later. There's actually buzzers have been hatching. I can see the adults above the water at the moment. There's low cloud at the moment, very, very light wind, and it's sort of, it feels close. If I was salmon fishing or trout fishing, I think I'd probably feel it was on. After all the rain we've had, as I said, the river's come up about 5 foot, so that's not going to happen right now. But Jethro, what do you think about barometric pressure, those sort of effects on pike, and do you think that comes into play?
I mean, part of me thinks we overthink it, because I've had probably the most successful pike days I've ever had on bright sunshine, perfectly flat, calm, The pike have been active, they've been high in the water. I've been fishing floating lines a couple of foot below the water, and the fish have been on. So I always get onto a lake like conditions we have today, and I tell you, oh God, this looks perfect. But then actually, if I look back through my diary and look back at the conditions that have been the most productive or produced the most days, I'm not sure. I mean, I was on here 10 days ago and had an 18 and 19 pounder. Fish switched on for a 2-hour spell. And I was always absolutely determined that if you had bright sunshine and white horses, then you may as well stop fishing. What was I catching? Bright sunshine and white horses. They just switched on. So I don't know. I think settled weather generally for a period, or the same conditions for a period of time, helps. I think if you get wild fluctuations, it can certainly turn them off. Easterly wind, we all know the saying, if the wind's in the east, fish by the least. I think that stands true. I try, if I see an easterly wind come in, I'll generally try and avoid it, certainly early on in the year. But I also think we do overthink it, and you never know. It only takes one fish to be hungry, right? And you put a fly in front of it and you've got a magic day, so we'll see.
There's some really good points there, and we often say on here that just get your fly out there and think about how you're fishing it, and you never know what might happen. And again, I've been thinking a little bit about what Jethro said about the slow retrieve, and how a slow retrieve may or may not, because we don't know, how that may bring a fish into play, that if it's just slowly gone in front of it, does that mean it wants to bite it? It's an easier meal for it. There's all these sorts of lovely things that we can think about and throw into the mix to get us thinking about it. But do you think that can provoke it? Or, moving a fly slowly in front of a fish, do you think that can provoke it? Or, like you say, we just don't know, I guess, do we?
Perhaps. I think I like fishing a sink and draw technique, making a fly on it look like an injured fish, and I think that certainly can. But then on the flip side of it, I was here the other day, and we were using slow retrieves, and suddenly Jack said, "Oh, there's a big fish, deep follow." It was just cruising underneath a fly, looking at it, half interested, but actually had no real intention. And I said to him, "Right, I'm going to just speed up the retrieve, fast as roly-poly as I can, cast out as quick as I could." Didn't give a fish time to think about it, and next thing you know, hooked an 18 pounder, and that was from going as fast as I could, because suddenly they've got to make a snap decision. So again, I wish I knew Pete, in all honesty. It's just figuring out, we'll spend the day now trying to work out what they want, and it'll be interesting to see if it is one technique that works. We should probably get our thoughts together at the end of the day and see, actually, has it been a fast retrieve? Has it been a slow retrieve? Has it actually not mattered and we've just found some hungry fish, or we've not found any fish at all? But let's hope that's not the case.
Well, we'll give it a good go. We're gonna, as I said, we've come down to one of the far ends. There's a lot of reeds around, and the bank here. And how deep's the water, Jethro?
About 13 foot here, but we're going to try and fish 9 to 12 foot water.
It's about 13 foot, and as he said, there's weed. You can see the weed down just about on the bottom there as well. So that's the idea, is just to fish above that weed with these tips and see how we get on. So we're just sort of passing the time, really, and talking about tarpon, about all sorts of fish and places. And I asked Jethro, still fast retrieve, and he said yeah, because he'd seen a fish move, and so we moved around a little bit. And you know what, I was just pulling away, and I got lucky, and I got a fish on, which I'm super excited about. I wasn't expecting anything either, so I'm really excited that's come to pass.
I think you've got more than lucky here, Pete. I think this is a very, very big fish. It's certainly a proper chew pike.
Yeah, they're sort of dug in. It really ripped around, and yeah, he's gone round the boat and he's pulling line again. And we're fishing, is it 10 weight lines or 10 weight rods at the moment? And yeah, he's pulling. There's no two ways about that. It's a strong fish. It's been almost completely around the boat now, which has been extraordinary. I can see the density tip now, and we haven't got a look at the fish yet. So he's still hugging the bottom, but yeah, geez, I don't know if you can hear that line being pulled now every time he comes close to the boat, and it's strong. The rod is really working hard. I've sort of got the butt of the rod in my ample belly, and he's just he's pissed, he's pissed. And it's not what I thought it was going to be. I've caught many canal pike over the years, but this feels a proper fish, and it seems almost strange. We were talking about tarpon and how, perhaps that would be a fish that would interest me greatly, and how, the super big tarpon, probably not. We were having that conversation. I was saying the baby tarpon, the 20 to 30 pound is perfect, and this kind of is like that feel. I haven't seen it. I don't know what the size is. I'm not really the person to ask about these things. As a former guide, my size, you probably do need to take a few. Oh, he's taking it off the reel now as well, so that gives you a clue. I had wound some in, but he's got no signs of letting go just yet, or relenting in any way. What are you thinking, Jethro?
I'm just wondering if he's got his head in some weed and we're drifting. No, you've got him. I'm thinking it's going to be close to a 20-pound pike, I think. What's your PB, Pete?
My best pike is, Jethro just asked my biggest pike, and I think it's about 12, 15 pounds, something like that. He thinks it's getting nearer to 20. I'm sort of getting a little bit more on it now. I've got some more line in. It's a little bit closer to the boat now. And yeah, he's gone again. Jeez. These things I can't. It's a nice sign when Jethro's sort of moving the net into position as well. But this thing, jeez. And do you lean into them a bit more?
Really,
can I lean into it? Yeah. Right.
You've got 40-pound leader on,
right.
So I'd be giving it a
bit
more
so
weight.
I can give it a bit more beans, but yeah, he's gone again, but not then, I won't.
This is a big fish, Pete.
Yeah, Jethro thinks it's a good fish. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I saw the backside of it then. And yeah, he said with being a trout angler, I'm sort of trying to bring him up a little bit here, and oh, he's gone again. Yeah. He's strong.
Wild, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm the fish I'd caught, or the pike I've previously caught in canals, just aren't quite like this. This is extraordinary. How strong he is. Oh, and he's gone again.
I think it could be a 25-pound fish.
The size is going up now a little bit, but we'll see. I'm trying to work him up a little bit when I can. I'm letting him go when he wants to go, and he's strong, so I'm guessing he's pretty well hooked as well. And the retrieve was, as I said, we were talking about mixing it up, and Jethro had seen a fish move near the surface. He just doesn't want to. Yeah, he doesn't want to go, and had moved us just a short distance, and so we were fishing slightly higher in the water. We got the same tips on, but we're fishing a little bit quicker and varying where we go. I don't know if you've seen him. No, he's not seen him yet either, so there was a gasp there. The funny thing about these podcasts is you never know how it's going to play out, and right, we're seeing some, oh, Jesus.
Big fish.
Yeah, jeez.
25-pound fish.
Yeah, he thinks it's a 25.
Come round the...
Yeah, I'm just trying to get round the... Just trying to get around the boat now. And there's a bit of handing of microphones so that we can... Jesus, mate.
Oh, it's actually a 30-pound fish.
And that is, I just got to look at it then. It's deep, broad, and it's ripping line yet again. Just doesn't want to know. Jeez. I can't believe how strong this fish is. Right, I've got the leaders in the water. We've got another look at him now. I'm going to try and bring it. Jesus. Ooh, bloody hell. And that is an extraordinary fish. It's deep, it's broad, and yeah, that's an extraordinary fish. That is down to Jethro. It's his skill and getting me in exactly the right spot, calling the play, and that's where I'm very lucky. I get to fish with people like this who know their shit. There's no two ways about it. I've got to be honest with you. I'm shaking a little bit. I'm petrified of having to hold this thing. It's absolutely huge, and I don't know what to say. I can see the back of it now. It is like a great big crocodile along the back, mottled. Jethro's getting some scales out now, so he's going to weigh the fish now, but it's absolutely extraordinary. And yeah, like I often say on here, I've been around the block, I've fished a bit and caught a few fish, and this is the wonderful thing about fly fishing, it still does this to me. And now he's just lifting the net up, the fish is in the water, and it is, Jethro? 30.
It's going 31.
31 pound. We've got to take the net off, so I guess it's just going to be 28 pound. That is a phenomenal fish. Jethro, thank you so much. You're an absolute superstar. Put me on the right flies, put me in the right kit, put me in the right spot, and thankfully a pike came along. I'm sort of sitting here now trying to process what just happened and playing in my mind what had happened, how it had played out, how, through Jethro's tutelage as well. He said how relaxed I was playing the fish with the microphone as well at one stage, and then he grabbed hold of it as well and held the microphone for me as well. He's weighed the net, and that's £3, so it is a 28 pound fish, which has probably doubled my biggest ever pike. And it's just sort of amazing. I do these things not for that moment, yet it's just quite extraordinary when something like that happens. I'd have been just as happy chatting about fishing with Jethro on here, and moments like this make it that little bit more exciting. And Jethro clearly had a very clear plan of where we were going, where we were heading, what was going to happen, and it is those things. And I hadn't seen the pike move near the surface behind us, but he'd spotted that, moved us into position. It may have been that fish, it may not have been, and fished the flies. As I said at the time, I've got to listen back to how garbled I actually sounded, but listening to what he said, and I was saying, are we keeping him high near the surface? Because he rightly said, there's no point fishing below a patrolling fish, and he called that absolutely perfectly. Jethro, that was wonderful skill. You called that. It happened as you'd seen a fish. Everything has happened due to your call of the play. So thank you. I owe that fish to you. That was your skill that did that. Thank you very much. And that was pretty cool, wasn't it?
I think you're doing yourself a disservice there, Pete. You were the one that made the cast and ultimately played it and landed it. But yeah, I was feeling pretty confident coming to this area. As you said, we saw that one fish up on the top, and that made me instantly think, well, maybe there's feeding pike around. Let's speed the retrieves up, keep the fly higher in the water. And then sure enough, bang, there it was. And I was thinking about, Pete, maybe you should be doing that slow figure of 8 there. I was just about to say something. Next thing you know, you've caught one. But what a fish. I mean, that's as big as any pike I've ever had on chew, and you've had it within 20 minutes. So I mean, that is a pike of a lifetime. That's an absolutely cracking fish. But I'm intrigued to hear what your take is on the fight, because I guess you've not experienced these big reservoir pike before. But for me in the UK, they're big wild fish, and you don't get that, that pull really in the UK in quite the same way. Certainly not with any coarse fish. But I don't know what your take is about the big pike on the reservoir in that sense.
I think the timing was perfect. As I said, we were talking about tarpon, and without the leaps, and I'm sure, I don't know whether, do these big fish leap? Will they leap? Yeah, so they will leap. It was kind of like that with a better hookup. And the strength of the fish was astounding. I was amazed how it just pulled and pulled and pulled. And it would have been, I'd get back a bit of line, then the fish would yank it straight back out. There was no two ways about it. Off it went. And that was the extraordinary thing about the strength of the fish. I think tarpon, for me, is about the nearest I can get to it without the acrobatics. With this fish on that occasion, it was very like that. I had and I don't like the term, and it is an apt description of the rod hooped over, but the rod was hooped over, and the fish, I was locked into that fish. I could gain a little bit of ground occasionally, but a lot of the time that had control of what was going on there. And, when it wanted to go, I let him go. So I let her go, as I should say. But yeah, just beautiful looking fish as well, aren't they? Absolutely stunning.
They're so wild, and as you say, mottled and that green colour. They're just prehistoric. They're the perfect apex predator, and I'm shaking as well. I haven't felt like this about a pike for a long time, but just seeing you hook into that fish, they're super special, and I'm just glad that listeners at home got to experience that with you, because they're just such a magic fish, and hopefully that comes across in the excitement that we both felt when you were playing it so casually, one-handed at times with the microphone.
It was. I guess I was trying to appear calm. I wasn't inside, but it was kind of cool. Interesting things I should mention. Jethro's skill of handling fish. Went through, right, this is where you want to hold it. This is how you hold it. There was a mat. The fish was returned quickly as well, and swam off. I swam off without any issues whatsoever, and we kept it to as minimum as possible. As I said, there was a mat there ready. Everything was done. We kept the fish in the water for as long as possible. We kept it in the water just to give it a little bit of a breather as well, and it went away. And those things are really important too, aren't they?
Absolutely. And we've got to take care of these fish. These waters get a lot of pressure. And, quick photos, it's important you've got all the gear here. We've got a cradle, we've got an unhooking mat. You want to look after the fish as much as possible, keep it as low as possible when you've got the photos, no standing up in the boat. We rested it as well. That was an important thing. It's just had a hard fight. The last thing I want to do is lift it out of the water and have it gasping for air. So just resting it in the water while we got the boat ready, while we found the forceps, whilst we got the camera ready for a photo, all those things. So, we've just got to protect them. Pike thrive on neglect ultimately, and when we're here we've just got to respect them as much as we can.
Wise words. After the excitement's died down a little bit now, you relax, or you settle into a really relaxed, nice rhythm, chatting. We've talked about just about everything, and it's been really enjoyable. Jethro's excellent company in the boat, and passing on tips, and sometimes I was forgetting to hang my fly, and he said don't forget to do that, and he's making the changes, and he's just changed to a fly that he said was very successful for him, and it's slightly weighted, and what he does is strip and draw it so it looks like an injured fish, and we're waiting there. There's another boat in the area. We think they've had a fish. It looked like they had a net under something, so that's encouraging. The wind sort of swings every now and again, but again the water's it's barely ruffled. It's pretty calm at the moment. It's just a very gentle ripple on there at the moment, and we're continuing to work the water, and it is fun. For me, it's completely different. I just was saying to Jethro that I get it now, and I've read and heard so much about fishing for these great big pike, and being able and lucky enough to be put in a position where I could get a shot at one and catch one. And I get the feel of it now, and it really is, it's almost hypnotic that you're sort of working off of the boat and casting at different angles and varying your retrieves, and as Jethro's just done, change flies and change stuff up a little bit. And it's really interesting. The nearest I can get, and when I was describing the fishing, I think the nearest to it is probably tarpon fishing without the visual aspect. And one of the things we were talking about, and Jethro asked me about, if you had one more day, where would it be? And I think I chose pocket water, and I've really recently fallen under the spell of Italy and the pocket water. And then I said, well, actually, if it were pocket water anywhere, I'd really, really enjoy that. And we started talking about saltwater fishing as well, and the visual aspects. I think actually it's the visual aspect of it that I love. If there's an opportunity to see a fish, and I think if that were my one last shot, it would probably be somewhere where I could see a fish. And I think the reason I gave that I like it is it sort of tests you, and it shows whether you're doing it right or not. And I think that's probably what I would choose, but you probably hear Jethro casting over me. He's a magnificent caster as well. So I was flinching early on, not because of his casting, because you're thinking great big heavy flies flinging through the air, but I feel absolutely safe as well. So it's been really cool. As I said, I'm just having a breather, and we were talking about how fishing affects us, and we'll have a conversation in a moment about it. But I think that's one of the things as well, is if you're sharing a boat with somebody, it's lovely when you can click with somebody and get along and chat and talk about stuff. And it's not, and he made a really interesting point to me as well about, he comes from, he's an elite sportsman and played squash to the highest levels. And I said, do you take this into your fishing? And he said, no. And I asked the question, is that because it's the antithesis of what you did? But also he said, well, we've had a fish and we're a team, and he's dead right about that. And he was excited. He was shaking like I was, and I'll be equally as excited if he gets to catch fish as well. And I think that's the nice thing about it. And coming back to the balance of the camaraderie in the boat as well, as whether you're, competitive or not, we're both willing each other on, and me more so now than him, and I so would like that to happen. But it's been a team effort, and he's put me in the position, he's given me the technique, he's given me the rod and flies. So it's been a team. I've been a small part of the team, but it's been a team effort. So you've changed your fly up, and it's one of your favourites. What you got on?
It's a classic Clydesdale jig. So Paul's Clydesdale, one of the Fulling Mill patterns. So it's got a weighted head, and it's only about 4 inches long. But it's probably been my most successful fly actually over the last 3 or 4 years. Fishing a long leader on an intermediate line. So all the success kind of this early part of the season's been on DI7s and DI3s. But just fancy seeing if we can get down fishing slow. You've seen the depth it can get to even with the intermediate line. So yeah, just trying a little silver roach pattern really.
And it's nice when it comes in because it's staying deep in the water. It must be pretty exciting when you see a big pike come after it.
It's great. I mean, that's part of the excitement. We were talking about the visual aspect of fly fishing. You don't get that to the same extent out here, but where you do get it is that end of the retrieve. I've been telling you to fish it a little bit tighter to the boat, and when you do see a big pike come out of nowhere and just come up and literally come up vertically, and you've got these jig flies just coming up to the surface, it can just be wild. It's proper heart and mouth stuff. Nice.
And you'd have heard me talking into the mic about fishing your one place that you'd love to go. What is your, we've been talking about everything, nothing, but with fishing as a loose theme to it. And where is your dream destination? Where is it that you'd love to head? Where is that place that you may have ticked but want to go back and tick it again, or is it somewhere new?
That's a good question. So I think it comes back to the visual aspect. I've done a lot of permit fishing. I had a really long trip back in Mexico. We talked about it before. And beach fishing, wading through when there's no waves and you can just sight fish permit on your own, purely DIY. I think that's, if we were looking back on the fishing I'd had that I could repeat, that would be it. I was lucky enough to be in Baja earlier this year, caught some roosters off the beach, only babies, running them down kind of tourist beaches, like found some busting bait, which was cool. But I think that idea of the proper running down the man, chasing grande, that kind of thing out on my own, that's probably tough to beat. But I think it's got to be visual. It's permit or roosters, I would say, and just me versus them in a bit of a hunt.
I like the sound of that, and I was just thinking about what you were saying there. Do you think this form of fishing for these sorts of fish taps into your saltwater psyche a little bit as well, and that sort of kind of makes it interesting from that point of view for you? Because I know you're keen on trout fishing as well, but do you think this taps into that, your passions for overseas travel as well?
I think so. I think the thing I like about pike is that they go big and they're powerful, and you've just experienced that power. And a fat rainbow, it can pull some line off, but actually it's not that real heavy tug. So there's definitely a satisfaction that comes with these big fish. They are wild. it's you versus them. I've got no problem. We've talked about, rainbows. I've got no problem with it. It's not for me. But yeah, there's just something magic about these big kind of prehistoric fish, and yeah, they're genuinely wild. So that's the component for me. It is different because it's not sight fishing, but I was explaining to you that buzz that we had, knowing there's big fish here, knowing they were on the feed, and just that feeling that at any moment something could happen. Getting that buzz is really cool. It doesn't always happen. We've been pretty lucky to experience that this morning. I was saying, langurs, fishing on poppers. You get that. That's when you can kind of get the visual component with the pike. But it's a different type of fishing, and I'm aware it's not for everybody. We are fishing sinking lines and casting out, and we've experienced it now for the last hour. It's gone a bit quiet, and you kind of grind it out as well. It's definitely not easy, but then when it's on, it's just I find it really hard to beat. Certainly here in the UK, it's really, really tough to beat.
And you were saying about this flying when we were chatting about it as well, and that you'd hooked a rainbow of about 4 pounds, and then he had some company, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah, no, I was on here last year, and hooked a really good solid rainbow just on one of these small flies, about 4 pounds. Came up to the surface, flashing around, and next thing you know, this huge pike, 25, 30 pounds just came up, but looking at a 4 pound rainbow, and that gives you an indication of the size of the fish that are in here. It's, we were saying they obviously can fill up on roach, but equally, it's a trout reservoir. They clearly do eat trout. That's why trout reservoir pike get so big, right? Because they are eating stock rainbows, and if they're going to eat a 4 pounder, they're going to be laid up for a while. So there was competition here at the weekend. Undoubtedly plenty of fish have gone back. They're going to be struggling a little bit, or a couple of them will be struggling a little bit, and then a big pike comes along and picks them up. So it makes it challenging in some respects, but that's what kind of brings the size to the pike here as well.
Nice. And for trout anglers as well, it's fascinating. We're in very early May still, or 9th, 10th, I think it is 9th. And there's plenty of buzzers hatching, and I've not seen a trout rise yet. I've seen one leap out of the water, but I've not seen one rise. And, I was talking about, and Jethro was asking me earlier about river fishing, how the season been, and many conversations. I'm so sure you're talking with friends, and the chap Toby, where we bought our licenses as well, I happened to know, and he was asking how the fishing was, and he'd been fishing in Wales and there wasn't much going on, and it seems certainly in the west and southwest that the season's still trying to get going. It's struggling a little bit, and so if you are out there and it's not feeling great at the moment, I don't think you're alone right now, to be perfectly honest. So hopefully things will perk up a little bit soon, and those fish will be rising. But yeah, I've not seen a fish move here. I don't know what it's like, but I always knew historically that Chew and Blagden for big buzzers, and I'd have thought there might have been somebody who came up and had a look, but all seems pretty quiet here at the moment. Weather's lifted a little bit. The sort of heavier cloud has sort of left. It looks a little bit higher now. There's some blue through the clouds now, which we didn't see first thing this morning. We've sort of been working an area that Jethro has a lot of faith in, and of course it's worked, as you well know. We've actually moved more to the middle of the lake, I guess, and had a quick go there. But I thought it'd be interesting if you're considering, pike fishing and what you'd need. I thought it might be quite interesting to get a sense of what Jethro's using, particularly when it comes to line densities, leaders, leader lengths, and tippet or trace. So I wonder if you can tell me a little bit, if you can take us, fly lines, you've been mixing things up and you've had 4 rods set up. How have you set those up?
So we've got intermediate DI7 and the DI3 here. Still a little bit early in the season, I think, to be on the floating line, fishing 9 to 12 foot water. But I guess that's my preferred method. If I know that the fish are on, I like fishing higher in the water. So a floating line, would always be in my bag. But not necessarily out today. But we've got 10 weight rods, say the selection of lines there, and then leader lengths a little bit varied actually. I mean, I've been fishing like a 5 or 6 foot leader on the DI7, and then you've obviously got your 12-inch trace, which is £40, 26-pound knottable wire with a fast dash clip on the end, just making it easy to change flies. But on the intermediate, I've actually got a 12-foot leader, and then on the DI7, it's a fair bit shorter than that. And you've got on that DI3 about an 8-foot leader, I think. So there's not necessarily anything right or wrong. Generally with the DI, the fast sinking lines go a bit shorter, and then try and have it a bit longer with the higher visibility, like intermediate or floating lines, just to put a bit of distance between the fly and the edge of the fly line. But I think again, we're overthinking it. A hungry pike, I think, a really hungry pike, I think you could just tie it straight onto the fly line, to be honest, and you wouldn't necessarily have a problem. But yeah, pretty simple setup. 10 weights here on these reservoirs. Got big, powerful fish. You've experienced it now. You want to be able to put a bit of stick into them and bring them in as quickly as you can, really. So yeah, minimum a 10 weight rod, I would say.
Nice. And it looks, as I said, it's been a fascinating morning. It's quite relaxing sitting here. You're sort of stretched nicely across the boat, and like you said, it's been quite civilized, because Jethro's been fishing pretty hard. He was out yesterday as well, and it is the casting, and it's been a lovely surprise for me to chuck a longer line and 10 weight rod. I can't even remember the last time I threw anything over a 6 weight, I would think. So it's been fun to do that. It's been interesting. I've had to dial things, think about things a little bit more, and with those heavier flies on, I'm thinking about how and when I'm releasing line and how many false casts I'm doing. All those sorts of things have been really interesting. I've had loads of great tips that Jethro's passed to me that I've tried to pass on, and even for me, where I was trying to lift the fly up and hang it like we would with trout fishing, and if I was doing that from a boat, then I'd roll cast and set it. He said, well, the problem is you need a strip set, so I've learned to bring it in, the fly in nice and close, and then bring it sideways in, really, before I lift it as well, so I'm set to strip strike on a fish if it takes. All those little things have made it really, really interesting. It's nice to see people out on the water. It's not what I'd call it busy either. There's probably 4 boats, I think, have been out, 2, possibly 3, maybe pike interesting, and there's a couple of guys look like they're having fun trout fishing as well. But it's been really, really enjoyable so far. We've had something to eat. We're just sort of soaking it all in and talking. It's like I said, the lovely thing is when you get somebody in the boat that you just hit it off with, and we're talking about all sorts of stuff, and it's been fascinating. I should let this roll a little bit more, but to do that. But I wanted it really to circle more on the fishing than anything else. But I think we're going to shift back to what I would term now the hot spot, and I think we're going to head back over there and give that a go again. So Jethro made the call. We moved. He suggested I change my fly. I've thrown it out to the side of the boat, and I caught actually a rainbow, an overwintered rainbow of about 4 pounds or so. Geez, that was strong as well. And then I threw to the same spot again, and I'm luckily, I can't believe it, into another pike again. And it was that change of fly. I said, I'll go with whatever you fancy. He said, this is nowhere near as big. Not size is important, but I'm just astounded how strong they actually are. And he's thrashing around every time he sees the net. He's off like a shot, and I'm sort of bringing line in and talking to you at the same time, but we've got him in, and that is extraordinary. Again, this is the maestro is here, and he's called it, and I've been the lucky one again, and I think it's extremely lucky. What do you reckon? That one, 5, 6?
Maybe a little bit smaller, actually. Yeah. I think, but it's. You're amongst. How well did that fight? How much energy did that have? How much bend did that put in a 10 weight rod? It's just unbelievable.
I was astounded by that, because I really thought it was going to be a bigger fish, and I'm not. Again, you'll notice my sizing of the fish. That's the guide in me, so I was too big there. But a beautiful fish, and it's full of life. We're just going to probably unhook this one and let him go on his way. But yeah, again, this is when somebody's fishing a place, knows it well, calls the play, calls the fly, and you're the lucky one. So thank you, Jethro, again. That's another one for our team, and that was, that's more him than me, but another pike, and yeah, absolutely thrilling. So just about to start another drift, and we're looking out, and I said to Jethro that, I'm thinking about taking my coat off, and then we looked out behind us and there's some black clouds coming in. There is possibly some rain on its way. That would be my guess now. That blue, there's some patches in front of us now, but behind us, the sky's looking quite menacing right now. Does that mean a change in pressure? Be interesting to see. We've gone back into the mid of the lake, probably almost mid of the lake, 3/8 away from the bank or so, something like that, and we're going to drift into that. We've not been using a drogue at all, and we've just been casting out either in front of us, but as Jethro said at the beginning, to the sides as well, so that keeps that line nice and tight. Otherwise you're just, and I know exactly now what he meant about that, the line is just moving with the flow, so you're pulling in line most of the time rather than retrieving the fly. So at those angles, and that last pike came that way, the trout I had was that way as well. So I've been learning some great stuff. But yeah, we're watching the weather with great interest to see if that throws anything out for us. So we moved, the rain's come in a little bit. It's not super heavy or anything. The wind had come up a bit, and then Jethro moved us a little bit further back down for a similar sort of drift. We're not using a drogue today. We're just drifting with the flow of the water. So what that means is if we're throwing it dead straight out with the drift, as he'd said, the word contact is really, really key. So you move the fly a little bit quicker. But the wind's dropped, we'd moved, and the water's very, very flat again. And we talked about what this change in weather might do. And then immediately I'd sort of had a whack. I did a lovely trout strike into it, so that didn't stick. I'd felt weight, and I felt, but having caught the trout that I caught, that it felt some weight. And then about half a dozen casts more, something similar again, for some reason, close to a trout strike. This one I didn't think was quite as aggressive, but I felt some weight very briefly, and it was gone. I've just seen a rainbow leap. It could be anything, but that shift and that very slight change in conditions may have helped things just a little bit. And Jethro was saying that usually he works on the basis of about a take an hour, and that would be a good session. So we're sort of kind of in that ballpark. You are. Yeah, we're kind of in that ballpark at the moment. So fingers crossed. And I'm sitting watching Jethro fish for a little bit now and see if something happens. As I said, it was immediate from changing position. And, I know he'd said early on that fish can turn on and off very, very quickly. So it'll be fascinating to see if this develops into something a little bit more meaningful. And I know he certainly won't trout strike as well. So it's got a little bit cooler now. It's 5:30. We've moved around. We followed some hunches, tried mixing things up. Jethro mainly as well. Just thinking deeply about, okay, let's think about this, let's think about that. And the thought process has been wonderful to listen to. And, it's been for me just one of those wonderful days. And yes, we were lucky we caught some fish, but it's been about a whole lot more than that. And my takeout from it is, have I been an avid pike angler? The answer to that is no. I've done a fair bit of it. But I've so enjoyed today. It's been really fantastic to be able to spend time in the boat with Jethro as well. That's been the thrill for me, and talking about so many interesting things that we've tried to capture a little bit of it here, but we've talked about more than just fishing as well. And just it's hard work. I'm not going to lie about it, that in the casting, I love casting, so it's not really been an issue for me, but you've got to put the hours in, you've got to make the cast, and it's been nice that we've sat down and talked for a little bit. But I've really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. But making some longer casts, fishing 10-weight rods, like I said earlier, I can't even remember the last time I picked up a heavyweight rod and cast it out, and that's been interesting. And the key thing, I think, is the question I'd probably ask myself is, would I do this again? And without hesitation, I'd say yes. And it's not because I was lucky enough to catch some fish. It was because it's really good fun. And it's, what do you grade this on a 0 to 10 in a toughness day? Where would it come in?
For you or me? I'd say this has been it's a good 5.
Yeah, it's a good 5. So, we've had some fish to the boat. I've had some whacks on fish as well that perhaps I could have converted, perhaps they weren't. I'm sort of semi-confused because of the rainbow trout I had as well. So that was so aggressive. But, we won't know that. But I've loved it. It's been really fascinating. It's a fish that I'd like to try and learn a little bit more about as well. And it's been really nice to have Jethro's thought process and skill and knowledge of the fish as well, which has been wonderful as well. So I think I'm going to be back. I think I'm going to be looking around for a 10-weight rod and the kit. And I think I could easily be suckered into that. And I mean that in a good way, because it's just been so good. And the lovely thing about Chew as well, we were talking about it off mic, is how pretty it is. And it looks as though everything's been landscaped here. It may be maturity, but there's trees coming right up to the water's edge. It's a really pretty, it looks a natural piece of water, although obviously it's not. And it's just pleasing on the eye to see. And the weather this afternoon's been a little bit shitty, it's cooler now as well. But that hasn't mattered. We packed everything in, so we've got plenty of tops, we've got waterproofs, we've got everything else. We've been organised on that front. We've eaten well. And so, yeah, would I do it again? Without a shadow of a doubt. Jethro, I've tried to express what today has meant to me, and I'd like to thank you for so much being part of it. But for listeners, can you express what fishing at Chew for pike means to you?
I think so. Since I've moved back to Bristol, I think it gives me this this kind of escape from city life. It gives me this escape from sitting behind a laptop. And it's 8 hours out here. I'm not really thinking about too much. Obviously, we've had a wonderful conversation, but just immersed in the fishing in many ways. And I've described it to you many times as this kind of long meditation where you're just focused on the present moment. So I think there's that kind of escapism that comes with it. But as you've alluded to, it doesn't feel like we're on a reservoir here, right? It feels like a natural lake, and those peregrines kind of flying over. So I'm a country boy and a farm boy at heart. So there's this kind of connectedness with nature and just with the wild, because it does feel wild, and the fish feel wild, don't they? And so I know we're only 20 minutes away from Bristol, right? But it's just a chance to get out, and I just had the best day today. It's been so nice, just kind of chewing the fat and hopefully passing on a few tips, but just seeing you catch that. What genuinely is a fish for a lifetime to a lot of people, and for us to have it kind of so early doors and just see that pleasure that brought. And even when you handed the rod for me to for you to get the microphone out, just feeling that power and that raw, the raw power of those fish is just amazing. So they never fail to wow me, those big pike. So yeah, just being out here just puts me in a sense of peace, really. It sounds silly, without overstating it too much, but just love being out here. I love being in nature, and then just having a chance to get connected to a big pike is just perfect, really.
Yeah, and you need the props because you put me in the best places, you gave me the best flies and everything else. So, I was lucky to catch, and it feels like a fish of a lifetime. And I know we were both shaking afterwards as well with excitement and the adrenaline and everything else. But, that's down to you. And, I'd like to say a massive thank you to you for that, because it was good and it transcended fishing. And, I've probably witted on about that somewhere else in this podcast, but it was more than that for me. Yet, getting the chance to feel the power of these fish was extraordinary. Somebody who's used to catching trout on a trout stream to feel that. And I know I said earlier it's akin to tarpon, I think is the nearest I can think. We fished hard and we fished long, and I'm tired, but it's a happy tired and a good tired, and I'll smile the whole journey home. So I'd like to thank you for being on the podcast again, for being such a great company on the boat, and also for being such a great host and giving me these wonderful shots today. Jethro, thank you so much indeed.
Thanks so much, Pete. It's been an absolute pleasure and just wonderful to share a boat with you, and hopefully the first of many more times.
I have a sense it will be. Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this excitement. It's been an amazing day for me. It's been a little milestone in what seems a long fishing career, and it's still lovely to be able to have these experiences and feel the same way about it. So I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. Thank you so much for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.